Welcome. Here we are. It is a Wednesday morning and we are talking all things humanizing business and work. We are mastering time, energy, and attention. And what I wanted to do today was really just hone in on that last element, attention. What does it mean? What comes up for us? Oh, is there a little bit of a rub going on with that word? But we're just deep dive in there. We're going to just go down the rabbit hole with attention today, and some really cool surprises, hopefully, for you all as well. So, attention. Interesting quote here from Killingsworth and Gilbert, who are psychologists that work at Harvard University. And it's interesting how what we're being told here is that the human mind is a wandering mind, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And that's really interesting because that's alluding to the fact that when our mind wanders, the cognitive achievement is decreased, and there is an emotional cost as a result. So that's quite interesting because for me, I find this quote something that I both agree with, but also disagree with, in terms of sometimes a wandering mind can be absolutely amazing when it comes to things like creativity and ideation. But let's just park that for a moment. And let's just continue the journey of attention. So what is it? What does attention mean? Well, if any of you have learned how to drive a car or ski or snowboard or even ride a bike, at some point we're probably told, don't look at the tree. Because if you look at the tree, that's exactly where you'll go and you'll hit it. So our attention is what we focus on. So attention is all about focus. And then the question becomes, what is focus? And focus is our thoughts. Focus is essentially our thought patterning. It's our thinking time. So what I've got here is I've got three numbers for you. I've got 11, 25, and 500. And I wonder whether you know what any one of these three numbers means. And if you think you do, then pop it into the chat, because I'd love to know if anybody can hazard a guess at which one of these numbers and what they mean. So let's just have a look at what they mean. 11, according to a study that was a study conducted with a group of humans, knowledge workers working in the tech department of an organization, is how long they can focus before they are distracted. So 11 minutes of focus time was on average the maximum amount of time. So on average, after 11 minutes, they're thrown out of focus, they're distracted. So the focus time is 11 minutes for this particular group. The number 25 is very interesting because in the same study, they found that it took up to 25 minutes to get these knowledge workers back into focus. So they're staying in focus for on average only 11 minutes. And once they're bumped out, it takes up to 25 minutes to get them back into focus. That's astounding. Think about the pattern of blocks that we use for working hours, Monday through to Friday, 9 to 5. I know there's variations of that, but just on an average. And start mapping those two numbers in there. 500. What does the number 500 mean? What comes up for you? So 500 is actually the percentage of increased productivity that an individual has against someone else when they are able to perform in flow, when they are able to be in zone. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. 500% increase in productivity. And that's based on some research and some work from the Flow Collective and the work of Stephen Kotler. So the key thing here is this, isn't it? When we focus on the right things in the right way, we're likely to get more done, which means that focus is the ultimate productivity hack. And we all would like to do more with less. We would all like to increase our productivity in some way, shape, or form, wouldn't we? Absolutely. So the secret to more productivity is in the word focus. Why? Because it is focus that drives your attention. Attention is the output of focus. So we need to be thinking about focus as a cognitive muscle. If we think about focus as a muscle that's inside our brain, and then what we can do is we can start to build an exercise program for that focus muscle. It means that we can lengthen that focus muscle. We can, be in focus for longer, lengthen it. And also we can strengthen it. And what I mean by that is whenever we need to call upon that focus muscle, we can. If I was to ask any one of you now whether you'd be able to get yourself into focus just, by wanting to, would you be able to? Would your muscle be strong enough for you to be able to just get yourself into focus? I wonder. So the muscle of focus is a cognitive muscle that we should be exercising, that we should have an exercise plan for constantly, in order for us to lengthen it so that we can stay in focus longer, and strengthen it so that we can get into focus as and when we need it. And that will mean that we'll have more attention, and that will mean that we'll be hacking productivity and increasing our productivity. And who knows, maybe even touching on that number 500, the 500% increase productivity of people that have been working with Stephen Kotler in the organization, the Flow Collective. How incredible is that? Wouldn't we all want more of that? What on earth is getting in the way? Surely this is just the way forward for us all. Why is suddenly focus and attention so incredibly difficult? Because we are all suffering from a time pandemic. We are suffering from a time pandemic. The biggest crisis of our time in terms of knowledge work is time. Let me ask you a question, or just, throw out some reflective thoughts for you all. How many times do you say things like, oh, I'll do that at 5 o'clock? Actually, I'll do that at lunchtime. When it gets to lunchtime, I'll do that. Or perhaps, oh, looking at the clock, I've got 20 minutes before I need to do that and be there. I've got 10 minutes. I've got 10 minutes before I need to be wherever I need to be. Or even worse, how much time have I got? Which is increasing the stress and increasing the environment. Looking at the clock and just thinking, oh, how much time have I got? The clock is ticking, the clock is ticking, the clock is ticking. When do we need to start something? Asking ourselves, when do we need to start something? When do we need to finish? By when do we need to finish in order for us to start? This is the natural language of work so often for all of us. And what about this one? Just give me a couple of minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. Just give me a minute. And really what I'm alluding to here is how time has suddenly completely pervaded our language, our narrative, our lexicon in work. It's no wonder we're obsessed with it. We're using the words of time all the time. And one of the things that I do when I work with people on time, energy, and attention mastery and productivity is this. We've all had the little Fitbit watches, and I'm sure, there's many people on the call here today or listening on playback that are doing their 10,000 steps a day, or how many ever 1,000 steps. And every time you do a step, there's a click. And one of the things that I do with teams and I do with leaders is I ask them to click. How many time clicks do you clock in a day? And that is essentially, can you become conscious of how often you use time words, time narrative in your conversation, in your thinking conversation, and also in your spoken word? And every time that happens, clock it. and just see how much time language has pervaded your conversation and your narrative. That's a really, really good indicator for something important. Is time something that you are a slave of, or is time something that you are a master of? And one of the easiest ways to do that is to start assessing how often the time narratives, the keywords around time enter into our conversation. That's something that I really recommend for everybody to do. There is something about time. I mean, time management, energy management, task management, attention management, they're all interrelated without question. But I think, Srinivas Rao here, this quote is something so fabulous for us to think about. What matters more than length of time that we put into something is the intensity of its focus. So that gives us a recognition that instead of obsessing with time, being more focused into the cognition of attention is probably where we want to be. Focus to attend, as opposed to length of time. Because of this, look at the second sentence. If we have an intensity of focus, what we're able to do is reduce the amount of time that we're spending on something. If we're able to focus deeply, if we're able to increase the depth of focus, the intensity of focus on a task, the likelihood is that we'll spend less time on that task, and the result of that task, what we achieve as a result of that task, is likely to be better. That's productivity. Yeah, doing more in less time, and the result of what you're doing increasing productivity. So that's the journey to the 500% increase that Stephen Kotler talks about. So it's very, very important for us to try and transfer our kind of focus away from time and onto attention. And the way that we do that is we need to train that focus muscle. We need to really, really train that focus muscle. We need to lengthen that focus muscle, and we need to strengthen it. So time versus attention is important for us to recognize and start separating. When I start, having these conversations around time and task and attention management and even energy management, it's all a single blur. What we need to be doing is we need to be understanding them all as separate things, so that more space there is in between them all, the more intensified we can be in the right places. And that's what mastery is all about. Super, super, super important. So, really important for us to recognize the difference between the attention management and the time management, place more and more and more and more space between the two. And as Adam Grant says in his work, a lot of this is also about prioritization. So there's something about purpose, there's something about prioritization that is intrinsically connected with focus and attention. Less so with time, but more so with focus and attention. And what's beautiful here is the quote of, if you prioritize the people and projects that matter, it doesn't matter how long anything takes. And I was with a group of practitioners on Monday morning, and we had a session on purpose and prioritization, and we revisited this quote from Adam Grant. And one of the practitioners on the call actually said that they're working with a very, very, very high profile customer, and they're supporting that customer through a complex transformation program. Now, in a normal environment, in a normal setting, as a consultant, what they would be doing is they'd be looking at quick wins. They would be looking at how can we achieve something quickly, time, in order for us to build trust and credibility with the customer. But what the practitioner is doing, practicing, bringing humanity into change and transformation, is she is prioritizing conversation. She is prioritizing one-to-one conversation and human connection with people in the organization. And some of her colleagues are saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? We haven't got time for that. Where is the productivity? Where is the output? Where is the results? We need some quick wins. And she's saying, No, actually, I'm going to continue on for 2 weeks doing nothing other than prioritizing people, prioritizing the people that matter. And I'm going to do it for however long it takes. And the change is already happening. The trust is already building. It doesn't matter how long things take if we prioritize the people and projects that matter. So prioritization and purpose is interrelated to the whole concept of focus and attention management. But we also have to give ourselves a break, right? Because there is this concept of content shock. We are in a world of, wow, some people call it the attention economy, because every single thing from every single degree of a circle is vying for our attention, is trying to pull us away from what we should be doing to what they want us to be doing, to what that app wants us to be doing, to what that TV program next episode wants us to be watching, etc., etc., etc. And this is called content shock. There's so much content out there. And Michael Schaefer, way back in 2014, predicted that before 2020, the sheer quantity of content being produced by businesses would vastly outpace an individual's ability to consume it. There's more out there than we can consume, than we can comprehend. So it's really important for us to recognize this in a work environment, but also in a personal environment, as I just mentioned, about all of those things trying to distract us. So the concept of the content we give, as well as the content we receive, is super important. We need to be managing that. We need to be in control of that. I'm not just thinking that this is a flow that just happens, magically, intrinsically as part of life. No, it's conscious. We need to be conscious about what we are giving, what we are asking. We need to be conscious about what we are receiving, what we are choosing to receive. So it's very, very important for us to recognize this idea of content shock. And there's also a theory which is called just-in-time theory, and just, thinking about how we as knowledge workers, as practitioners and leaders in a modern workforce, can start to address the very concept of there's more than we need out there. So there's no such thing as perfection. There's no pointers. Just keep going on content, keep consuming, keep giving, keep receiving. There has to be an understanding of what is the threshold of just in time, just enough. Just in time, just enough. There is also the work which is called the thinking environment. And the thinking environment is a framework of 10 key principles that, if we adopt these 10 principles, we are able to become a conscious thinking environment rather than a doing environment. And this is something really important when we're thinking about humanizing change and transformation, bringing humanity into the workplace. We have for so many years, because we haven't had the maturity of technology or the access and flow of data, we have been doing. The humans have been doing the transactional work, the repetitive work, the consistent work. Whereas now we don't need to be doing that. So we want to move from doing workers to thinking workers. We want to be truly knowledge workers in a corporate environment. And the thinking environment is a framework that is absolutely fantastic to help us to transition from doing to thinking. And of the 10 principles, the very first principle is attention. Attention here in terms of how we are able to give absolute 100% attention to conversation, to task, to moment, to the present, without interruption and with full curiosity and interest. And what's interesting about this in the thinking environment framework is that if we are doing this, it's not just absolutely fantastic for ourselves. It's also something that rubs off to others. There's energy in here. There's energy that passes on to the people around us. It's just fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Attention management is so powerful. And it comes from our ability to exercise that focus muscle. So again, we're back to the start. Focus on the muscle. Focus on building and strengthening, lengthening and strengthening that focus muscle, that cognitive focus muscle, in order for us to master attention. So what do we do? Where do we start? In terms of being able to create an exercise plan around our focus muscle, well, we probably need to do a little bit of hacking. So let's think about attention hacking. And when I'm talking about attention hacking with people, I always try and keep it in two camps. Again, separate, keep space between these two things, because if you do that, it makes it easier, it makes it clearer, it makes it more purposeful, it makes it more meaningful, it makes it more motivational for you. You're more likely to succeed. So attention hacking is twofold. It's about taking things out, and it's about focusing in. It's about taking things out, and it's about focusing in. And taking things out is removing distraction. Putting things in is about flow and deep work. So we want to do both of those two things. And it's not necessarily linear, but at the beginning of attention hacking, we do tend to remove distractions in order for us to create space for flow and deep work. But they're not linear, they're interrelated. But in order for us to hack attention, it's really quite nice for us to separate these two things out. So we want to, using these two things, create the environment for us to be able to build that athletic brain that we mentioned earlier. And we want to build an athletic focus muscle that is both long as well as strong. Because the one thing that is a truism about focus is this: there isn't a human being on earth that is in focus all the time. The reality of the age we live in is distraction. Therefore, we must be prepared to be distracted, which means that we want to be able to come back. We want to athletically create and build the muscle that we can come back to focus from distraction. And also, when we want to go into a wandering mind for creativity, that we can, that we know how to. And that gives us an athletic, focused muscle, an athletic brain. So much of what I'm talking about here is really flow practice, is really deep work practice. And the concept of flow is exactly what I've mentioned earlier on. You know, to achieve that 500% increase in productivity, that is literally achieved through entering into flow states, or creating environments and practicing deep work. Deep work and flow, very, very similar. Some people would say that they're the same. I would say they're slightly different. So what is flow? What is flow? Flow was created in the 1970s. Flow is the result of a huge amount of research, a passion project that Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the founder of flow practice, a positive psychologist, the product of his work in the around about the 1970s, but it was full of amazing conversations and research that he was doing with athletes, that he was doing with creative artists, and even just general people on the street. And it was something that really piqued his interest and curiosity post the Second World War, when he started to investigate what makes people happy. How do people achieve happiness? And that's where the whole concept of flow comes from. That's why it's so closely linked to positive intelligence, to positive psychology. And that's where this work is really important to us, because flow is something that is available to all of us. It's not magic, it's not mysticism, it's not for the super duper high achievers. It's for everyday life, because we've all entered flow. Whether we know it or not, we've all been in flow. And if I ask you a few questions like, have you ever driven a car and got to a place and thought to yourself, God, I can't even remember driving here. Well, actually, you were in flow then, because what would happen is you've gone onto your automatic brain and, your brain could just do what you needed to do. Have you ever been so engrossed in a piece of work that you've looked up at the clock and you've looked at it and you've thought that only half an hour has gone by and 2 hours have gone by and you've been so engrossed in something, so focused in something, that time has completely disappeared. You know you're in flow because time disappears. You know you're in flow because it's just this effortless, almost unconscious focus that we have. There are 3 key elements that help us get into flow. One is setting clear goals. We need to have an objective. We need to have a goal because there needs to be purpose. And the second point, which is a really interesting one, and something for me that I really had to work on when I trained as a flow practitioner, was the immediate feedback. Constant feedback is a really, really important element of finding flow. A lot of people try and get into flow using point 1 and point 3 here, and actually kind of, just sort of, just forget about number 2. But feedback is really important, and a lot of us fear feedback, where we feel vulnerable about feedback, because we see feedback as criticism, and it's very difficult for us to see it as learning, to see it as something that is positive, to see it as something that is strength building, which is exactly what it is. So the more we lean into feedback, in particular immediate feedback, in order for us to adapt, in order for us to learn, then that is an absolutely fantastic thing. So immediacy of feedback, not just feedback over a period of time, is so incredibly important to flow. And of course, the third element, which is the balance, which most people are aware of, most people have kind of been introduced to flow will understand, the kind of balance between challenge and task. And this is what we've got here. So those of you that are not familiar with flow, and those of you that may have been just introduced to flow, will be familiar with this. So thinking about the zone, flow, or deep work, one of the things that we want to be kind of cognizant of is the level of challenge, how difficult, how complex the task that we've been given is in relation to our capability, our competency, our skill, and the time we have to deliver it, the time we have to do it. So on the vertical axes here, we have the complexity of the challenge, the level of complexity of challenge. And then along the horizontal axes, we've got the competency, the capability, the skill, and the time we have to deliver it. And if those 2 things are in the Goldilocks zone, then what we are doing is we're increasing the likelihood of our ability to get into zone, to get into flow, to have deep work, to be able to perform deep, focused work. But it's not always the case. Sometimes we're given a task and we look at that task, and the task we feel in our belief system is actually a task that's beyond our capability. And that can throw us out of the Goldilocks zone. Equally, we might be given a task, or we might have a task to do, like an administrative task, that is almost beyond our level of skill. Beyond us as in, gosh, that's so easy for me to do. So you can be thrown out of the Goldilocks zone there, because you're kind of thinking, oh my gosh, I've got so much skill that this task is beyond me, because it's it's almost menial because of its the lack of skill that's needed for it. So it's really important for us to recognize some of the feelings, some of the emotions, some of the behaviors even that are a result of these feelings and emotions, that when we are thrown out of flow. So if our skill is above the complexity of the challenge, if we've got loads of time, more time that's needed for the actual level of challenge, we will be thrown to the bottom right-hand side of what you see in front of you here. We'll probably relax out of it. We'll probably be bored. Whereas if the challenge level is so high that we feel we have not enough time, or if we feel that we do not have the necessary skill, capability, or competency, we can be thrown out of the Goldilocks zone and into some of the emotions and feelings that are worry, anxiety, and even arousal. So it's really interesting for us to see these and recognize these in ourselves and also in others. And also in others. You know, if you've got somebody on your team that tends to be bored when they are given a task from you, well, maybe it's a conversation to talk about either skill or maybe the amount of time that they got. Maybe the deadline needs to be moved forward so there's just a little bit of edge. And that's the key. That's the key, is edge. Is living on the edge, is working on the edge. Because if we're always just on the edge where there is a little bit of edge, is a little bit of stretch, then again, that increases our propensity to find flow. Flow is an incredibly important element. Attention management, focus management, the reduction of slavery to time, is all of this is so important to who we are as modern leaders. And it is also incredibly important to us all if we are practitioners in the world of change and transformation. So everything that I'm talking about today are very, very intrinsic in terms of the practice and the content and the work that we do with leaders as well as practitioners. And of course, if you would like to engage as a leader in more of our modern work, then you more than likely would want to think about one of our blended leadership programs, or indeed our one-to-one mentor coaching programs that help leaders develop that modern mindedness. So thinking about that mental capacity, that modern minded mental modeling. So what we do is we hack into your brain and help you to go through transformation in order for you to outcome and behave and to evidence in your organization as a modern minded role model. And when you're a modern-minded role model, what you're doing is you're creating trust in others to come on the journey of change. You are creating an environment for successful change and transformation, and that cannot be underestimated. But equally, you might be a practitioner in the world of change and transformation and wanting to bring this and other key elements of humanity into the design and the delivery and the practice of your work. And to do that, we have certification programs. And again, if you feel that you are already doing some of that and what you might want is less training, but more one-to-one supervision, that is also available to you as a practitioner. So these are some of the ways that you can engage, or your organization can engage with bringing some of these key modern-minded practices into either our leaders or into our change and transformation programs. And of course, as many of you will also know, I am also building up my passion project at the moment. So Tea with Mel is the mastery of time, energy, and attention. We want to turn that Pareto's law away from 80% action, 20% mind. We want to be able to do 80% mind and only 20% action. We can do more with less. We know that. I know that. I've been there. I've done it. I've hacked my way through to time, energy, and attention mastery. And I'm now really, really excited and super passionate about helping others to do the same. So Tea with Mel, a 12-week high-impact transformational coaching program, one-to-one, once a week with me, a unique, personalized program for mastery of time, energy, and attention for you in your practice, in your professional and personal life. If you'd like to know a little bit more about that, then you can email me directly on mel.ross@adaptodigital.com or follow me on LinkedIn at melross1. You can also join our Tea with Mel page on LinkedIn and indeed on Instagram. There I am, a little bit more informal, but modern.mindset.mentor, just for you to get some hacks and to just see some of the techniques that are available to you to master time, energy, and attention. But before we finish today's session, what I want to do is I just want to give you some kind of hacks that you might want to go away and think about. And these are quite general. They're not very specific, but equally, it's a good place to start, because within each one of these things that you can see here, no doubt there are different subsets in definitely one or two of them. So the first thing that I want to talk about is focusing out. So, getting rid of things. So, clearing out. So, just thinking about the things that we want to get rid of in terms of the distractions. So focusing out things. The first thing that we want to do is just recognize that technology is not our master. Your computer, your mobile phone. In your mobile phone, think about your notifications. In your mobile phone, think about your apps. Think about how you have set up your mobile phone. Think about how often your mobile phone is in your line of sight. Does it need to be in your line of sight every time? Research and studies show that every 6 minutes, people are likely to check their phone. Do you need to? So think about that. So your apps, think about your notifications, think about the visibility of your mobile phone. And then, of course, your laptop or your computer, and thinking about, maybe something that runs on your computer like email. The majority of knowledge workers have their email open all day. Do you? All day. Do you need your email open all day? And then we become a slave to the ping. We become a slave to the pings of our technological world. So really thinking about the programs that are running on our laptops, on our computers, thinking about when we should be using them, and just taking those distractions away so that we are actually only seeing visibly one app, one technology platform open at any given time. And there's things that we can do like bookmarks, etc., etc., etc. If you're kind of thinking about what I've just said and thinking, gosh, Mel, I'll be opening and closing things all the time, we can put things into the background. We can kind of just take things into the background instead of having everything so visible. That content shock piece again. Environment is key. Hey, environment is so incredibly important for us. And the immediacy of our environment in terms of our desk, but also the room that we're in, and the colleagues that we're working with. Perhaps if we are spending time in an office, what kind of office is it? An open office? Thinking about our environment in terms of the cleansing of the air, thinking about the noise, the level of noise, the kind of noise that is happening within our environment, the cleanliness of our environment. It's all so many different elements of the environment. I think number 3 is subtle, implicit, but very, very powerful and important in terms of, focusing out, is getting clear on expectations for ourselves and for others. Because if we're clear about what needs to be done, if we're clear about expectations and goals and outcomes with others in terms of conversations, then that will allow us to be more focused. If not, then that stuff becomes distraction because it's not clear. There is no stop. We haven't closed the loops. We want to close the loop on things. We want to get clear on expectations. Number 4 is an interesting one as well, to ditch passive rest so much as replacing it with elements of deliberate rest. And what do we mean by that? How many times do we get to the end of the day and go, oh, I just want to zone out and watch some Netflix? That's passive rest. And that's not necessarily the best type of restorative mental rest that we want. Deliberate rest is something that is far healthier for us from a cognitive perspective. And what I mean by that is doing something like cooking a meal, doing something like listening to music, doing something like tapestry or artwork or some poetry or gardening, something that you already have a passion for and a skill for, that you can do, that will rest your brain, but also there's a deliberateness about it because it is healthy rest and renewal. as opposed to passive, like Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever your flavor might be. And then headphones. If you are in a kind of noise sensitive area, you might want to use headphones. I guess for many people, the concept of headphones is arguable. So there's a school of thought that says that headphones are not that great, especially the ones that actually put directly into our ears. So that I would say to you all from a headphones perspective is use when necessary. But if there is a way that you can maybe physically remove yourself from that noise distraction into a place of quiet, then that might be a better focus out option for you. But it's not always available to us. And I am hoping that each and every one of you by now knows that there's no such thing as multitasking. The biggest myth around time, task, energy, and attention management is that multitasking is an absolute myth. Your brain can only have one thought at one time. We cannot have two thoughts at the same time. So there is no such thing as multitasking. As much as it might make you feel better, you're just not multitasking. You are going from one thing to another. It just might be you're doing it quite fast. So really important for us to just, forget about multitasking. Zoning in is really, really important because this is the practice of flow. And as I mentioned earlier on, the three key elements of getting into deep work, the zone and flow, are reiterated here. Clarity of goal is the purpose. If we know why we're doing something, it can give us a head start for getting into flow. That sense of immediate feedback constantly, because that immediate feedback gives us the ability to stretch. That immediate feedback gives us the ability to keep adapting, keep checking in with the work so that we don't get into that sense of boredom. That's so incredibly important, and something that lots of people do not necessarily spend enough time on. And I really, really do recommend that number 2 is equally as important as 1 and 3. And of course, as we've seen today already, the balance between challenge and task stroke time, because that gives us stretch. That's what we want to do to get into that Goldilocks zone. We would just want to be in the stretch zone, not in the comfort zone and not in the anxiety zone. 3 additional things that are important as well for us to consider to help us to focus in, to get into that zone, is the regularity of breaks. There's so many times that we think that we just need to get something done, so I'm going to spend 6 hours on it. Your brain is not going to be focused for 6 hours. So we really need to be thinking about regular breaks, designing the breaks. And the important thing here is to recognize your own focus. So start to understand through journaling, perhaps, start to become conscious of when you come out of the zone. When you are focused and then you are distracted, just check in with time to see how long it takes, so that you start to understand your own current average of focus time. Is it 11 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Is it less? Is it more? And then if you know that, then every so often, what you can do is you can think, right, well, if my average focus time is 20 minutes, every 15 minutes, I'm going to give myself a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to increase it, and then I'm going to increase it, and then I'm going to increase it. So keeping the regular breaks, but extending the time of focus in between, is a way that we can stretch and build that focus muscle. Connecting in with nature is really important. So if you can, is really important for us to do that. And sometimes it might be something that we need to do inwardly, because we might be living in an urban city, but hopefully there are parks that you might be able to go and walk through, or even thinking about indoor plants or a garden area. But it's really important. Those of us that are able to connect with nature in terms of, the countryside, even more important is that the more time we spend next to trees, the better. The science is starting to come out now. The science is starting to tell us that can actually really, really positively support our focus. And of course, something as simple as music. Music is really interesting because the music that focuses us into the zone isn't necessarily the music that you might think. So it's, you know, thinking about solfeggio music, thinking about deep work music. If you go onto YouTube or any of the music apps and just put in focus music, you will be able to get music that helps us to move from theta brain waves, beta brain waves into alpha brain waves, which is where we start to enter into flow. So music isn't necessarily just getting some rock and roll, Def Leppard or Queen playing, but it actually is specific music that helps us to move from beta into alpha and eventually potentially even deeper brain waves. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer up a 10-day challenge. So in the next couple of weeks, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pumping out and promoting a free 10-day challenge. So days 1 to 5, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at that focusing out. So we're going to get rid of distractions. We're going to clean up, simplify, and take back control in areas of our work and our life. And then from day 6 to 10, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing in. So we're going to be looking at purpose, looking at goals, looking at meaning. We're going to think about boxing, look at some of the techniques there, choose one of those techniques and start to recalibrate our days, our schedules based on that as much as we possibly can, and look to what the concept of stretch means for us cognitively. Really, really exciting. At the same time, across those 10 days, we're also going to be having a little bit of a journal challenge at the same time and just consciously seeing what everybody is clocking in on their daily time word count. So as I mentioned earlier on, really, really cool thing for us to do, because that gives you an understanding, an assessment of how much of a slave or master you are to time, the narrative of how time comes into your words, both thinking and spoken. And I'd also like to say to you all that I have a free download as well, which gives you 10 ways to refocus. Because as I said earlier on, it is a given that we're going to be distracted. I am distracted. We are all distracted. Even the most amazing athletes that are in the zone so often still get distracted. It's the modern world we live in. So when we are distracted, it'd be really good for us to have those techniques for how we can get back in, how we can refocus, recalibrate back into a focused brain, a focused cognitive muscle. And the free download gives you 10 ways that you can do that to get back into focus really, really quickly. As always, a few banana skins for us. When I talk about focus and attention, there will always be talk of flow, zone work and deep work. It's not mystic. It's not magic. It's not for the few. This is something that is for all of us. We all have capacity to get into zone because we do. But what we want to do is we want to consciously use it and build it so that we master it and control when we are in zone, so that we are increasing our productivity, so that we can ultimately do more with less. Do more work with less time. Wouldn't we all want a bit of that? And the other banana skin as well is that it's a one-time fix. If you want to really benefit from some of the incredible outcomes that are experienced through flow practice, attention management, you've got to understand that it is just that. It's practice. It's a journey. And it's not just do it once and once it's done. Once you've got it, you've got it. It is absolutely something that becomes part of who you are. It becomes a part of your identity. So thank you for listening to me today. I really, really hope that you are, and just pop it into the chat. So let's see some things in chat. I really hope that you are going to come and join me on that 10-day challenge. So just say yes in the chat. Also say 10, put the number 10 in there if you'd like the free download to be sent to you. And all of you that are listening to this on playback, again, exactly the same. So please do let me know if you would like to be a part of the 10-day challenge. Just put yes in the comments, whether you're listening to this or you in YouTube or in via email. Reply to me via email with yes in the subject line, and of course the 10 hacks for getting back into focus. Just pop 10 into the subject line as well, and we'll get that free download out to you as soon as possible. So there we go. Ultimately, focus is a muscle. Focus is a muscle that we can build. And it's really important for us to recognize that. So as much as we put focus into building our physical muscles, the world that we live in today, with all of that content shock and all of the stresses of us all as knowledge workers, focusing in on that cognitive muscle and stretching it and strengthening it will give us everything that we need to succeed. Go well, stay safe, be focused, and I shall see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you so much for joining me.